Support for WUWM podcasts comes from Johnson Financial Group, helping customers build financial plans around their unique goals for over 55 years. More at johnsonfinancialgroup.com. Johnson Bank and Johnson Wealth, Inc. are Johnson Financial Group companies.
This is Capital Notes from Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Maayan Silver, speaking with J.R. Ross, editor of WisPolitics.com, in a special post-primary edition. So, hi there, J.R. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me.
What a wild election night. It was teeter-tottering between tenths of points, sometimes a dead heat, in the Democratic primary race between Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley and State Representative Francesca Hong. What are your big takeaways from the night?
A couple of things. One, there was obviously a surge for Crowley in the end. Now there's a debate about whether the polling ahead of the primary was any good, if it missed what was going on. But what is clear is that Crowley came from dropping out of the race July 8th, getting back in July 18th to being the nominee on the early hours of August 12th. So it's quite a comeback. And there's a combination of things. One, give credit to Crowley and those around him. They spent some $4 million at least on paid media. Governor Evers was a big assist campaigning with Crowley in the end. And the third thing was that Francesca Hong kind of dropped the ball a bit in the closing days of the primary that hurt her. And talking to insiders, one of the things they noted was that, after Mandela Barnes dropped out July 30th, rather than kind of saying, okay, I'm in the driver's seat here, I'm going to try and pull back, Francesca Hong went on national cable news and talked about Thanksgiving and how she had one time tweeted about calling for it to be canceled. Like, these are not things you do if you are kind of a seasoned candidate or have a seasoned staff around you. She made some real mistakes in how she interacted with the media. And if you add that in with people starting to say, hey, she can't win in November, and some other factors, that probably helped fuel that Crowley surge in the end.
Okay, so looking forward, well, actually, Crowley ended up winning, while Republican Congressman Tiffany ended up winning the GOP primary for governor. Looking forward, can you give a short synopsis of those two candidates' strengths and weaknesses?
Well, look, Crowley does not have the baggage that Hong did of tweeting about cancel Thanksgiving or knocking, being uncomfortable at a Culver's in northern Wisconsin because she thought there were a lot of old white people there who assumed that she didn't speak English, stuff like that. He has a lot of the same kind of beliefs in terms of policies, but Crowley is making the case that he's gotten stuff done. He's been county executive. Well, Republicans we're already seeing are going to attack him on things like raising taxes in Milwaukee County, crime in Milwaukee County, the issues with health insurance plan for county employees, that there was a little lapse there in how it was handled. They're going to make the case that he is just as liberal as Hong, just does things a different way. For Tiffany, it is that he is basically tied at the hip to Donald Trump. He is staunchly anti-abortion, and he's part of Washington, D.C. Obviously Tiffany is from, he represented the 7th Congressional District, served the state legislature, but he's part of that D.C. world because he serves in Congress. That's not a popular place to be. And in the end, this race is going to be shaped a lot by a couple of factors. Nationally, they can't do anything about. One is just the cost of living, and especially the cost of gas. And two, Donald Trump. Where are his numbers? And people have argued to me in the past few days that with Hong, it would have taken the focus off of Trump and the economy and put it more into Hong and her beliefs and her past social media comments. With Crowley as the nominee now for Democrats, it makes it easier for Dems to prosecute the case against Tiffany via gas prices and Donald Trump than if it was Hong that Tiffany was running against.
It seemed like no one was expecting that Democratic primary result. Do you think Republicans have been caught flat-footed on that as well, like expecting specific ads against against Francesca Hong that they already paid for that they can't use, for instance?
Well, there was definitely a point where they had to pivot. I mean, they were expecting Hong to get in, and you actually saw it in the week before the primary where Hong became this national talking point in the conservative media ecosystem of, oh, look how out there she is. She's the new face of Democrats. She's going to be their nominee for governor. she's got all these problems. We're going to start going after her. And in fact, the Republican Governors Association has a thing called Right Direction Wisconsin PAC, which is a group that is actually, like their spending vehicle in Wisconsin gubernatorial races. They began an ad buy in mid-July that was supposedly kind of an opposing Hong, but really it was designed to kind of boost her in the primary. It was talking about how she opposed Donald Trump's policies on immigration and ICE. It featured a clip of her saying in an interview that she was the only candidate in the primary who was going to take the Democratic Party back to its progressive roots. So it's like a wink and a nod kind of thing. Like, yeah, it's a quote-unquote opposed to Hong, but we're really trying to support her, and we want her through the primary. Well, July 31st, they switched traffic and brought a new ad in that was more of a contrast with Tiffany. It still highlighted how Hong opposes Trump's immigration policies, but again, talking more about she wants to raise taxes. And it's just an example of where Republicans began to count on the idea that she was going to be the nominee, began to treat her as such, and it probably didn't help them in the end that they began the kind of this barrage of attacks on her because they wanted to find her early and ended up probably helping Crowley a little bit.
This is Capital Notes. I'm Ayan Silver, speaking with J.R. Ross of WizPolitics.com. You've talked about how important it is for national Democrats or important donors to the Democratic Party to get behind the Democratic nominee in Wisconsin for them to be able to kind of have some legs against Congressman Tom Tiffany. Are you seeing that yet? Is it too early to tell? How is that going?
We've already got a buy from the Democratic Governors Association going after Tiffany. It launched the day after the primary. It's about $1.4 million that I've seen so far. So, yeah, they're going full tilt. And that was a big question, was whether they support Hong. But now with Crowley, they're definitely getting on board in this race.
Does this new head-to-head matchup between Crowley and Tiffany, how will it impact the efforts of both parties in Republicans' case to keep control of the Senate and Assembly, and in Democrats' case, their effort to flip them?
Look, a lot of the seats that are up for grabs this fall, Kamala Harris did better than Donald Trump in 2024, which is not a great year for Democrats. There was a real fear among Democrats and optimism among Republicans that Hong as the nominee would make it easier to win those seats because she would be a drag on the Democratic brand up and down the ticket. Now, with Crowley, it's much more back in Democrats' favor in the state Senate, where nothing is guaranteed, but they feel much more confident about the Senate now. Republicans, they have a tougher fight on their hands with Crowley as the nominee. Look, Crowley still has baggage. He's still going to get knocked about a bunch of things, but he doesn't have the baggage that Hong does. It changes the equation quite a bit. We're also now got to see, again, where's Donald Trump come October for his job approval ratings? How expensive is gas? A lot of times the winds coming out of Washington, D.C. shape elections because of what's going on. And the winds right now are blowing against Republicans because Donald Trump is not very popular and gas prices are high. If that changes the next 2 months, different ball game. If it stays that way, that makes it that much more difficult for Republicans because, again, the national mood so much anymore shape even local elections that it's going to be hard for them to escape that shadow of the president.
And as a congressman, Tom Tiffany, back in 2020, he voted to decertify the election results in several swing states and was going to vote that way in Wisconsin. He has been cast as an election denier. How could the Crowley campaign use that to their favor?
Look, my impression is that there are certain Democrats who get really animated about that, but most swing voters are kind of over it. They're not paying attention to that issue that much anymore. Now, maybe that's not the right thing as for them to take, but hey, we just know from the polls that doesn't drive people. What drives people is the pocketbook. How are they doing financially? Are they doing okay at home? That's what's going to drive this race more than that kind of stuff.
And in a midterm year, who are those actually undecided and independent voters in Wisconsin who are still actually choosing between Crowley and Tiffany?
Good question. And who's going to turn out? I mean, also let's be honest, Crowley probably has some work to do to woo Francesca Hong supporters. Some of them are non-traditional primary voters. At least that's the impression that we got, that they were new people who were attracted to her populist message on the economy. Does David Crowley have any attraction to those folks? Or do they feel like, hey, the Democratic establishment, he stole this from us or kind of intervened to beat Fran, and so we don't feel really good about voting for a Democrat, period. this fall we're just going to stay home. That's a big unknown.
What kind of coalition do you think Crowley could cobble together for himself in November, and what kind of coalition is Tiffany going after?
Look, Tom Tiffany needs the MAGA base to be fired up and animated to turn out, right? That he needs to follow what Donald Trump did. Donald Trump laid out the math for any Republican to win statewide in Wisconsin. Maximize turnout in rural areas and keep your losses down in Dane and Milwaukee counties. You don't have to get, win Dane County as a Republican, but you can't lose with 20% of the vote or 18% of the vote. You got to get the low 20s. That's what Trump did. Same in Milwaukee County. Trump lost Milwaukee County, but didn't lose as badly as what Tim Michels did 4 years ago. There's your math. For Crowley, follow the math that Tony Evers laid out in 2022. Maximize turnout in Dane and Milwaukee counties. Get the biggest margins you can. Trying to hold down Tom Tiffany in Waukesha County, which is a key driver for Republicans, and then try and do better outstate than what Kamala Harris did. So rural Wisconsin has plenty of voters. You just have to kind of not lose it as much as what Kamala Harris did.
Is it possible or is it more of an uphill battle when there's a competitive primary versus, Republicans consolidated their support around Tiffany pretty early? I'm assuming that's a factor going in their favor. But when there's competitive primary on one side, have candidates gone on to win the actual general election, even with 40% of the primary vote, like in this year's Democratic primary?
Tony Evers did in 2018. He was in the low 40s. There was a 10 candidate primaries down to 8 candidates who were active by August of 18. He was in the low 40s and he won. So yeah, it happens a lot. Jim Dole in 2002, 3-way primary for governor. He won that, then went on to win the 3-way governor's race with a libertarian candidate on the ballot and Ed Thompson. So yeah, seen it plenty of times. But again, it's a matter of, for Crowley, can he consolidate those voters and try and bring some of the Hong supporters onto his team?
And lastly, about election process, there was a little bit of human error on Tuesday night, the primary night, in getting the city of Milwaukee flash drives to the county. So that helped stretch out election night until about 2:30 a.m. when results came in. Can you explain the latest on the conversation around counting absentee ballots before Election Day and how central count works in certain locations? And is there going to be any momentum to change that before November? Is that impossible?
One, the legislature is not in session. They're not coming to change election laws at this point. Two, even if you had, and it's not early count, it's early processing. Remember that. You could open the absentee ballots, you could process them, you can't actually count them until Election Day. This wouldn't have fixed the Milwaukee issue. The Milwaukee issue was pure human error, where you download the results from the machines and take them over to the county to on the website. They didn't do it properly. They made a mistake in the first attempt. It delayed things. So that's a problem that goes beyond being able to process the ballots the day before. Republicans talking about having some kind of a hearing to bring people and talk about it. And the issue is, you can explain what happened in Milwaukee with central count, which a central count location is where a community takes all its absentee ballots and counts them in one spot, and then take them out to polling places and have them done by the workers at those polling sites. You can tell people it's a human error that, we have a paper trail in Wisconsin that those ballots can be counted. But I've already seen numerous conspiracy theories on social media of, this was Democrats who, quote unquote, found the votes to stop Hong. This is why she lost, not because David Crowley had a surge in support, but because they rigged things somehow with these votes. Again, the ballots are currently in bags. If you want to recount, you go back and look through every ballot cast in Milwaukee County and check to make sure how it happened. But this is what happens when you have these kind of human errors. It gives fodder for conspiracy theorists and drives these things on social media that, there's something amiss here, when it's just plain human error. And if this isn't fixed by November, it's going to be worse, especially if, let's say it's like 2020, Tom Tiffany is down or is leading at some point, or it's 50-50, and then all of a sudden Milwaukee's absentee ballots come in and all of a sudden Crowley's up in a lead. It'll be the same kind of situation where there'll be this conspiracy theory because the issues Milwaukee Central Count has had before. People cling on to those and claim fraud, even if there is none.
What would you suggest that people do about this?
I've talked to numerous people who said they need to clean up their act in Milwaukee. Like it's when it's human error, there's nothing more to do than get people who know what they're doing to run the show. That is the feedback I've gotten from people and numerous phone calls that there needs to be some kind of accountability here and some kind of a process put in place to not let this happen again. How did this happen, and how do you prevent it from happening again? Because again, when you do this, it gives fodder to these conspiracy theorists who then go run with any tale they want to about what's happening in elections in Wisconsin.
All right, thanks for the breakdown, JR. And as always, thanks for joining me on Capital Notes.
Anytime.
That was JR Ross, editor of WisPolitics.com, speaking with me, WUWM's Maayan Silver. Listen for our segments every other Monday with an extended segment on Lake Effect, and check out the Capital Notes podcast wherever you get your podcasts.